Adventurers, what's going on? Oh no, hold on. My settings. 1 second. How did this happen? Oh, it looks so bad. Let me fix it. That's better. Oh no. So embarrassing. The delay is crazy right now too. Okay. There we go. Welcome everybody. Hey, it's the Adventure Prep stream. Sorry about that. I thought I had everything all configured, but I guess not. Welcome. It is Tuesday afternoon. It's 2 p.m. my time. I'm not sure what time it is where you are. And I forgot to get my water, so I'm going to go grab that. I'll be back in like 30 seconds. Hey, what's up, David? Thanks for coming. One moment. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I have water and I have peanuts, so I have something to quench my thirst and something to reignite it. How's everybody doing today? It has been a long time since we have done an adventure prep stream, but I'm trying to get back into my streaming. I've been doing pretty well so far, but of course, now that I say that, I'm sure I will fall back off the wagon again. But for the moment, we are streaming. I'm excited. I'm starting a new campaign pretty soon. Well, it's not a new campaign. I mean, it's a new campaign. It's an old group. I've been gaming with this one group for maybe about 6 months, and they're a good group. They're a little bit shy. They're a little bit uncertain. And I had kind of been doing this thing. There's this phenomenon that happens with my professional games where people will hire me to run a one-shot for them. Yeah, grading water on the ProDM bingo box. Yeah, gotta get that water every time. I always forget it, and then I have to go grab it, and it's every single stream, every single time. You know, there's a surprising number of things you have to get ready if you're gonna stream. Like, I have to blast on every social media platform that I use, and I have to get my lights, and I have to get everything set up, and water is always the thing that I forget. Anyway, so I ended up running a lot of one-shots for these kids, these like beginner players who weren't sure if they want to play D&D yet. And then they play a one-shot and they like it, and then they want to hire me to do more. And so, you know, the natural conclusion is just like, let's just continue with those one-shot characters on some new adventure. But the problem is that one-shot characters never really get developed properly. They're not really campaign characters, right? So they kind of end up being these like thin one-dimensional shells. And there's no clear plot necessarily, the campaign like can last a couple more sessions, and then it kind of deflates because nobody really knows what they want or what the campaign is about. And so I kind of recognized this in one of my games where the participation I felt like was particularly muted. Only 3 players originally, and very kind of, you know, they were having fun and they enjoyed doing it, but you could kind of tell that they weren't really motivated by anything that was happening in the game. And so I saw an opportunity to reach out to the parents and say, like, could we maybe get at least 1 more, if not 2 more players in this group and try to kind of reinvigorate this game, because it's a little bit, it's kind of turning a little stale right now. And I think the kids would have more fun with some fresh blood. And so these great parents kind of rallied and got that figured out. And now we are starting the campaign again. And rather than continuing with the same characters, we are starting the campaign over completely. I did like a proper session 0 where we sat down and we said, we're going to make new characters. We're going to do something fresh. We're going to do this properly, starting from the beginning, right? Hey, Nuker Wolf, what's going on? I run a lot of different kinds of one-shots for people. Right now, I'm doing a lot of DMing for kids. So I have like a couple of kind of standard kid adventures. I've got one where the party finds a dragon egg and they have to try to protect it against this kind of Pokemon-esque evil organization, or Team Rocket-esque evil organization called the Dragon Slayers. And then I've got another one called Mordenkainen's Magnificent Mansion. Or no, it's the Last Will and Testament of Mordenkainen the Magnificent. And it's about a character who is distantly related to the famous wizard Mordenkainen. And then Mordenkainen dies because he's trying to become a lich. And he forgets that he has a letter that goes out to his closest his next of kin, telling them that they have inherited his mansion. And so those are the two that I have right now that I use for kids, but I have a bunch of others depending on the genre. But yeah, the one-shots then, they try to spin into actual campaigns, and they just don't go so great. So what this session is about, what this stream is about taking that session 0 that we did and trying to turn it into a campaign based on the Wild Beyond the Witchlight, which is the upcoming Wizards of the Coast adventure path that I'm really excited about. The kind of Feywild themed one that I've been talking about wanting for a long time. They finally delivered it, and here's the thing: I didn't realize that it wasn't out yet when I proposed it to the party. I proposed 5 different campaign pitches, kind of Matt Colville style, and they voted in a ranked choice way for the campaign premise they liked the most, and by a tiny margin, Wild Beyond the Witchlight, or what I called the Whimsical Intrigue, won out. So we got to run this now, but the book's not out yet, and I know very little about it. So what we have to do is we have to try to come up with like an introductory adventure, right, that will carry us through a couple of sessions until we get to the point where the book has already come out, and then I can kind of fold it in. So I know enough about the premise of the campaign, or of the book, the adventure, to kind of get us started and to set up the pieces. But we need to find a way to not only design an adventure for our player characters, but also to kind of set the stage for where this story will eventually take us, which is the Feywild. So let's go through our characters and our setting, what we know right now based on the session 0, and then we will go from there and try to figure out if we can weave these stories together into a plot that will basically take these 4 kind of disparate adventurers and put them together into a party by the end of this adventure. So, as I told my players, the campaign begins in the town of Greencrest, which I described as standing on the brink of a massive, as of yet unnamed, forest. And that every 8 years, this magical carnival, the Witchlight Carnival, emerges from the forest to entertain the townsfolk. Now, the Witchlight Carnival obviously comes from the adventure, The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, which is about a Fey crossing inside this carnival, and about the Domain of Delight on the other end of that Fey crossing, which I think is called Prismere. Yeah, and there's like a political intrigue going on where the Archfey of that domain has disappeared, and the land has been carved up between these 3 hags. That's about all I know in terms of the plot and what's going on in Wild Beyond the Witchlight. But I feel like for the purposes of this adventure, we don't super need to know what's going on in the Feywild necessarily, because we can kind of separate or bifurcate those 2 worlds. So the other kind of premise I had for this game was to have one of the big themes, which we'll put here, portal fantasy. I mean, it's obviously quite literally a portal fantasy, and the characters go through a portal, but I wanted to base it on a lot of the kind of classic early, like, young adult fantasy novels and stories that are, portal fantasies, where a character starts in the mundane world and goes into the magical world. Obviously, in this context, the mundane world is the D&D world, and the magical world is the Feywild, where things work a lot differently. But to kind of heighten this, my idea was the campaign starts with the characters as children, 9 to 10 years old, 9 or 10 years old, when they cross through the portal into the Feywild. It wants to say forest, yeah. Into the Feywild, they instantly age into idealized versions of themselves, a la Narnia, right? That it's like a time dilation thing. Oop, Narnio, right? That, like, we play this first adventure with them as kids, and then once they cross over into the Feywild, they kind of grow up and become adults. And either we level them, or we just, like, say physically, right now you're an adult and you have a bow and, like, all this kind of stuff, right? So the idea is that it is quite literally a portal fantasy, right? Which I like that. I liked connecting to the players who are all in their, like, kind of preteens, anywhere between, like, 11 and 13 years old. Connecting with the players on that level. Like, you know what it's like to be a kid. Now, what if you were an adult, right? Kind of literalizing the fantasy of Dungeons & Dragons in the game. Great. So let's talk about our 4 characters, and then we can kind of break down the individual story threads we might be able to weave together and find some way to make this campaign exciting. So we have Katza, who is a female half-elf rogue charlatan. Let's put this. I'm not going to name any of the players because I don't want to, out any of my clients. But the player is named I. And we'll get to them as we get there. Now, Katza is interesting. Here, I'm going to get some peanuts. Here's your ASMR portion. Ooh, you like that? Is that what you like? Yeah, I know what kind of content I make. There's no confusion here. So Katza is interesting. Great, now I have to talk with peanuts in my mouth. Katza is interesting because they are actually a character from the previous one-shot that I ran with this group. But again, pretty one-dimensional. Not a lot going on. They were a rogue. They were kind of tricky. The, rogue stuff. I, as a player, and when I say I mean the player I. This is going to get confusing. As a player, I is very worried about tactics and doing the correct thing. They're very good at biting the hook when it comes, but they are not as much into role play in terms of playing their character in a non-optimal way. So we talked about Katza and wanting to convert Katza into this system. So Katza is 10 years old, and the idea is that they are a charlatan as their background. What was really interesting for this campaign and setting it up was the question of background. What were you before you were an adventurer, right? And because all the characters are so young, my thinking was that the background represents your family or your upbringing, right? Obviously, he's not, she's not a charlatan, right? Because she is a child, is 10 years old, but her family is a family of charlatans, right? Her upbringing is that. So the idea was that it's kind of like the Richies that show, or the Riches that show with Eddie Izzard and Minnie Driver, where this family pretends to be wealthier than they actually are, right? And they kind of pose as though they're in high society. That's essentially Katza's backstory, is that her family are con artists who are pretending to be nobles in this small town, right? Kind of trying to throw their weight around. And, they have a fake name. Katza's fake name, I think, is I opened up the wrong thing. Is Karu, which I believe is the name of the character from Daughter of Smoke and Bone or whatever. I looked it up because, this player has a tendency to steal things from other franchises. I think Katza is a reference to something. Not Katniss, but some other thing. But, whatever. I did a lot of the same stuff when I was a kid. I mean, I still do that stuff. But the idea, right, is that, they're kind of posing as these nobles in the town. Which is fun and, instantly kind of gives you some stakes, right? There's something to kind of lose, their reputation. Now, one thing I wanted to do with each character is come up with a relationship to another member of the party. And so we'll talk about Izumi in a little bit, but that's one of the other players. And there's one party member who knows the truth about Katza and her background. What was interesting about this interaction was I had to convince the player, to to allow this to happen, right? I was like, what if it was this? What if it was this character who has these kind of supernatural powers, learns that Katza isn't actually who she says she is, or believes that this ghost tells her. And so now Izumi knows the truth, but Katza doesn't know that. And you could see the player kind of get rankled by this and grapple with the idea of giving another player kind of leverage over them. And they ultimately agreed, but it was interesting to see a kid kind of well, how do I grapple with this? What I should have done in retrospect was given him a hero point, which is a mechanic I use to help kind of level up my characters rather than using XP. And I'll often use it to encourage the players to role play or do things that are not tactically ideal. So that's Katza. A little bit light on the ground as far as actual things we can play with, but that's fine. Next we have Cinnamon. Cinnamon is a serpent folk. So this player, let me scroll back up a little bit. Oh man, my framing is wacky. Let me fix it. I'm like barely in the frame here. Okay. Sorry, I'm sure I'm getting some lag right now. I always do whenever I adjust my camera. That's a little better. Okay. Sorry for the lag. We're back. Now Cinnamon is funny. This player is obsessed with animals, and the player's name is V. V is obsessed with animals, and V likes to what used to be like obsessed with rats. They have 2 rats, and they would constantly talk about rats. And in the last game, I let them play an Izumi, or sort of like a rat person. And they recently got a snake, and so now they're kind of obsessed with snakes. And I mentioned offhandedly, like, yeah, there are these snake people in Dungeons and Dragons, and V got very excited, and of course she wanted to play a snake person. So I decided to kind of reflavor the Yuan-Ti, rather than having them be the kind of like overtly sinister Indiana Jones snake cultists that they are presented as in fiction. I prefer the idea that they are, you know, a little bit more like a tabaxi or a turtle or, you know, an aarakocra, just kind of like a standard animalistic ancestry. So I came up with the serpent folk was the term I used. But the idea was that, like, the life cycle of the serpent folk is similar to some of the profane rituals of the Yuan-Ti, where they start off looking more human, more kind of pure blood, and then as they get older, almost kind of like a Lovecraft thing, they look more and more and more like a snake. So that was kind of my, like, because I think V wanted to originally just play like a snake. And it's like, well, yeah, sure, but you have to, you know, be a person and walk around and talk and things like that. So thus Cinnamon was born. The idea with Cinnamon is that she was raised by her mother in this big forest that's near the town. She doesn't know her father. He left at a young age. She has a real name, but Cinnamon is a nickname given to her by her mother. I believe Cinnamon is the name of V's real-life snake, which is why V wanted to do this. This is what I mean about, you know, sometimes these kids make choices that are very transparently kid choices. But this is what I thought was really great about Cinnamon's character design, is that, you know, I said, hey, so there's this human town really close to where you would live in the forest. How does your mother feel about it, right? And she, V said that she doesn't think that, you know, I should go there, and she warns me against going there. And I was like, oh, great, but you probably do, right? You probably sneak into the human town. And V said, no, I listen to my mother. Why would I do that? It was this great thing. She went on this little screed about how she doesn't like it in stories or in fiction. She doesn't know what a trope is, but, like, this is what she's complaining about. People who are always so rebellious, right? And, like, not doing what they're told. So I like the idea of her actively saying, like, no, fuck that Harry Potter noise. Like, I do what I'm supposed to do. I'm a good child who listens to their parents. Which tells you a little bit about V and Cinnamon as a result. But the only other detail we have is that they like to climb trees near the edge of the forest. And so their relationship is that they one time saw Izumi. Ooh, yeah, one of those Cobra staves. That is cool. They one time saw Izumi, the relationship. The Warlock, who is getting a lot of attention in these relationships. Oops. Talking to herself in her room. And so she knows that there's something going on with Izumi, which we'll cover when we get to Izumi. But yeah, that's Cinnamon. V is a very shy player, often doesn't speak up, so I imagine Cinnamon will kind of fall to the back. Next up, we have Cyrus. Cyrus is I believe, a female tiefling monk. I never actually confirmed that with the player. Who is played by S. Now, S is the new player, and I had played with them before, but never in a campaign. So it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. They probably had the most, I wouldn't say the most developed, but I was really impressed with their characterization. S kind of looked at the party as they existed and then wanted to make someone who would kind of fit in and fill a role in an interesting way. So they decided to play a tiefling and a monk. When I do tieflings, especially with these younger kids, I don't necessarily emphasize the, like, demonic or infernal blood. I make that an option, but I say that a tiefling is someone who just has, like, magic in their lineage, right? So they could really be descended from any kind of magical creature. You know, it's a little bit, what's the line between a tiefling and a genasi at that point? But I think it's a little easier for them to swallow than just saying like, cool, your ancestors were demons, right? Because it just like, you could pick that if that's what you want, but then it's just like, I'm still kind of worried about associations with the devil and things like that with these parents who never played it before. So I told her, you know, these are the kind of the choices. It could be any kind of magical creature, and because it's a Fae campaign, maybe it would be more interesting if you were descended from the Fae. And Cyrus liked that. So Cyrus's player like that, I should say. So descended from the Fae, but I imagine kind of distantly. Oh, let me scroll this back. There you go. Big family, all tieflings. And Cyrus's thing is that they are kind of bookish and a scholar. They went off to essentially like a boarding school, right, and lived there most of the year. And then every summer, every holiday or whatever, they come back home to visit their family. A lot of siblings, but Cyrus is closest with their grandmother, who also has the kind of like monk or magical powers that is the only other member of the family that does. Yeah, and that's kind of Cyrus. I think the intention was to play like a bit more responsible, a bit more of like an older sibling kind of a character, right? Somebody who could look after the party. So they're older, they're 11, they're the oldest member, and they have that kind of like almost like matronly, like, you know, party mom kind of vibe. And then the relationship is that Izumi, once again, is a classmate at the same academy, which we'll talk about in a moment. So that's Cyrus, tiefling monk. And then lastly, we have the much lauded, much talked about Izumi. Let me make sure y'all can see Izumi. Yeah, great. So Izumi is a female half-elf warlock and a noble. Izumi's player is F, and F is a bit of an artist and a bit of an imaginative kid. F already had created Izumi as an OC for an anime, according to F, hence the sort of Japanese-inspired name. And so Izumi was probably the most fully formed of the characters, but was kind of also the hardest to realize as a result. I find that when people do this, when they take characters from outside the game and try to like port them in, there's kind of a learning curve. Like there tends to be a little bit of a gnashing. You know, this is what I want the character to do. This is what the character actually does in D&D. So we'll figure it out. But I was a little nervous when F told me that because I was concerned that, you know, it wouldn't exactly line up. But I'm still kind of worried about that. But the premise, as much as there is a premise in this character, is that she was born to like rich, somewhat negligent parents, and her big thing is that she's haunted by ghosts. You know, I don't know which anime. That's a great question, David. I should ask her. But that she's like haunted by ghosts, allegedly inspired by Five Nights at Freddy's. And they give her these nightmares. And that's about the extent to which F had really like thought about her character at all. And so I kind of went in and said like, well, all right, let's develop this a little bit more. So we determined that the ghosts give her powers. They scare her, yes, and they give her nightmares and stuff. But they are also responsible for giving her these magical powers she can't explain. She was having trouble picking a class. And so I thought, like, well, the Warlock kind of makes the most tonal sense, right? If you want this character who has this relationship with a magical entity, you know, the ghosts could kind of sort of substitute into a Warlock patron. Apparently the character was also somewhat inspired by The Sixth Sense, which is an old movie for a kid her age to have seen, but, you know, what can you do? So in asking her about like her parents and where did this power come from, she was a little vague, but she described that her parents have like a bunch of occult and cursed items in their house. And so my brain kind of went to like a Runaways thing, right? That like her parents were involved with something sinister, whether it's a cult or something like that, right? And she that's somehow how the powers kind of rubbed off on her, right? That's basically where I was at with it. That's an interesting point, David. I was thinking a diviner. Yeah, I think that Warlock like is gonna. The player has played a wizard before, and not that you couldn't. I mean, you know, you probably could do some cool stuff with like clairvoyance and stuff with that. maybe I might dip a little bit into wizard to get some of those spells. But I think it's a little bit more like put upon the character, I think. I don't think it's something that they necessarily went out and studied, although they did go to school. So their relationship then is that, while I think they're probably somewhat cordial with Katza, they are classmates with Cyrus. Specifically, while she attends classes, she's a poor student too distracted by the spirits that haunt her. So Izumi is presumably home from school as well as Cyrus for this particular adventure. And so those are our 4 characters. So kind of where we're at now is we have to try to synthesize all of these ideas into some kind of a usable plot, right? I did something similar with my Storm King Slender game, where the characters each came in with like half of a plot hook, right? Like, one character, the noble, had a famous father, right, who had all these big expectations about them. And one character, the orphan, had a kind of contentious relationship with the woman who ran the orphanage where they grew up. And one character had an old priest who had raised them that was right on death's door. And one character was an outsider who was just passing through the village with his father looking for his missing mother, right? So these like little tiny half threads that I can then pull on to do stuff or introduce ideas with, right? So something like that feels strong to me, but I would still like there to be some kind of a backbone adventure, like something they can go and do. Like in the Storm Kings one, I came up with this whole like kind of nearby dungeon they had to go and clear out. Now what's tricky about this here, right, is that these characters are very specifically children, and so I don't think they're going to have their powers properly until they actually, like, get into the Feywild. Which, I don't know how Wildland the Witchlight is structured. Maybe that's a dangerous precedent to set. But that was the original idea. So now we basically have to figure out, like, what kind of an adventure can these children get involved in that doesn't require them to, you know, use a sword or anything like that. I'm excited for that moment when they pass through, because then I can just kind of say, like, cool, what do you look like? What kind of gear do you have? And they just, like, magically materialize swords and armor and bows and staves and spell books and stuff like that, right? So let's see. We have these connections. I mean, Izumi is, like, obviously the starting point. We have these ghosts. And they seem like the obvious quest givers to me. Like, the ghost could potentially, like, steer Izumi towards other characters for some reason. I feel like we're missing, like a hook, right? I don't want it to be necessarily carnival related, but I wouldn't mind going into the forest. The forest kind of seems like the big thing. Particularly if we have Cinnamon, the serpent folk, who doesn't go into the town. It feels like we have to bring the townies into the forest, right? So beyond potentially being a gateway into the Feywild, what's going on with this forest? You know? Let me finish these peanuts. I could be done. Just my snack time right now. Snack time. Okay. Alright. So something draws the characters out into the woods. One idea I was having too is that in Norse mythology, there's this idea of the hidden realm. That, like, Ulfheim, the place where the elves and the fairies and, like, the sprites and stuff live, is sort of like a pale reflection of Midgard, of the mortal world, right? So I like the idea of, or not a pale reflection, but sort of like an inverse, like a photo negative, essentially, of the real world. That there's like similar places in both, and they kind of like lie substrate to each other. So I kind of like something like that. Obviously, that's not how the adventure is necessarily going to be structured, but it might be kind of cool to say like there are almost Wizard of Oz style people from their village are recast as characters in the Feywild, or they're like Fey versions of people they know, almost more of like a Coraline kind of a thing, right? Where it's like they find a version of the village in the forest or in the Feywild, right? That's like they find a version of Greencrest, like Christ Green, or like, you know, Creen Grist. You know what I mean? Like a strange upside down version of their village in the Feywild is kind of interesting. But we might be getting ahead of ourselves because that's all going to be stuff post-Carnival, right? So we need something for them to go, like something to pull them into the woods. We need to know more about the woods in order to do that. So let's talk about the setting a little bit. So Greencrest is, you know, your prototypical little town on the edge of a bigger wilderness. We know that this magical carnival arrives here once every 8 years. Now, the adventure probably provides a reason for this, but we have to kind of speculate right now. What is it about this town that is significant to the carnival, right? Like, why do they come here? We also, a family of occult spellcasters, have also taken up residence in Greencrest, right? Because Izumi's family is here. So why? There's something about the town, there's something about the forest, there's something about the Fey Crossing that is significant to this place and this place alone. You know what I mean? What is it about this place? What is it about this town, this forest, that draws the Fey, or that draws these occult spellcasters? My instinct, because she's dealing with like ghosts, is to sort of play with the Shadowfell a little bit, right? That like every 8 years the Fey come there and there's a Fey crossing, but every 4 years, like, is it a thing where like, you know, in the year 2000 the Fey come and they have the carnival and there's a Fey crossing, and then the year 2004 there's a Shadowfell crossing, right? And then the year 2008 there's a Fey, like, you know what I mean? That there's some kind of a thing where it's not just the Fey crossing here, it's also a Shadow crossing, and it's just a matter of you know, syncopating it. So the carnival arrives every 8 years, and that's the Fey crossing, but then every 8 years, but on a slightly different scale, is the Shadow crossing. It's an interesting idea, but the problem with it is that it doesn't really give us anything we can use right now, because it would be, unless we do like a 4-year time jump, right? Like we say, hey, okay, you're this year's old now, and you know, you witness a Shadow crossing, or the parents open a Shadow crossing, or something like that, right? Could it be that the parents are the ones summoning the Fey Carnival? Which I also don't like, because I don't really know. This is the problem, right? Like, we know so little. Even if we could get like a preview of like the first 10 pages of Wild Beyond the Witchlight, that would give us a lot more than we already have. Okay. I like the idea of some kind of weird agreement or significance between the Shadowfell and the Feywild, right? Like, to set them up as opposites to each other. Because I'm not opposed to, like, you know, making big sweeping changes to it. Has Shatterkai run it because they ooh. Well, I'll be darned. You're kidding me. Well, from what I heard, the Carnival has Shatterkai run it because they switched with the Shadowfell Carnival with the Fey owner. Is that true? I had not heard that. Huh. Okay. So the Carnival has That, you know what? That's right. I think I did hear, because it's Mr. Witch and Mr. Light, right? Are the two who run it. The carnival, their Shatterkai is run by Mr. Witch and Mr. Light, a pair of Shatterkai who switched. So, like, did they, like, is it still the Fae Carnival, but it's run by Shatterkai? These two? It's just like the owners switched ownership with a Shadow Carnival. Shadowfell Carnival. Okay. That's interesting. You're watching the D&D channel on YouTube. Okay. I guess I'm not up on that. Alright, I'll have to check it out. Thank you very much, Nuker Wolf. That's important information for me. Okay, so then how do we rope these parents in? We could do a thing where the parents are Shatterkai, right? That, like, because Shatterkai, I guess I don't know in 5th, but they're just kind of like Dusk Elves, right? They're just like a type of elves, like elves that live in the Shadowfell. So we could say that Izumi, who's a half-elf, is actually half Shatterkai, right? Owners switched, okay. So that means that there are a pair of Fae in the Shadowfell who are running that. So, like, is this the plan? Maybe we do a thing where they swap, right? Ooh. Okay. So what if instead of it happening just once, I mean, this is the problem, right? Is that, like, what if we do something that, like, radically changes the structure of the adventure? But okay. What if instead of changing once, they switch every 8 years, right? So it's like the Shadowfell Carnival and the Witchlight and the Fae Carnival show up every 8 years, and they swap, right? And then the two, yeah, okay, this is a little weird, but like every 8 years, no, but then, my idea was that, like, Izumi's parents, so just follow me on this, it doesn't make tons of sense yet, but Izumi's parents are Mr. Witch and Mr. Light. And they are waiting for the carnival to arrive so they can take ownership over it. Like, either there's an ancient exchange, right? Exchange between the two carnivals, or they've just, like, purchased it and it's supposed to arrive. You know, it's got to be the ancient exchange, because there's an ancient exchange where, you know, like the idea that, like, the Shatterkai live on the material plane for 8 years and somebody else runs the carnival, and then they come in and then they switch. So they did, like, Izumi's parents if Izumi is like 10, Izumi's parents when she was born were somebody else, right? Like, it's a super Coraline idea. And then at the age of, like, 2, they switched, right, with another pair, like 2 other parents, and then those people raised her, and then now that the carnival's coming again, they're gonna switch back. You know what I mean? If it's like an other mother thing. I mean, what if it's everybody in the town? That's kind of interesting. That every 8 years, the people of the Witchlight Carnival are actually the same people as the people of Greencrest, and they have a bargain where the Fae or the Shatterkai or whoever it is come in and then live the mortal lives. It's like changelings or whatever. I kind of like that. Yeah. Boy, this could be, like, totally wrong for the adventure, but that's okay. Every 8 years, the Fae that run the Witchlight Carnival arrive back in Greencrest and do an exchange. Everyone, all the Fae, take the places of the people, of the mortals in the town, and the mortals in the town agree to run the carnival for 8 years. It's like an entire town of changelings, right? I don't know why or how, but something like that is cool, right? Like there's some kind of a weird ritual that's done where, you know, they come into town and then they entertain, and then magically that night they swap, right? So the next morning when you wake up, yeah, because what I like about that, this doesn't give us our first adventure, but what I like about that is it gives the party like a reason to chase after the carnival. So you wake up and the day after the carnival in your bed or whatever, and the carnival's leaving, and you discover that your parents are not who they appeared to be, right? Like, they are new people that are posing as your parents, and they claim to be your parents, and they do all of that stuff, right? But because all these characters are so young, like, only Cyrus, maybe, being 11, would have any memory of that, right? I think that's really interesting. Yeah. After the carnival, when the characters awaken the next day, the irony is going to be that like it's going to come out and it's going to be like completely the opposite, or this is going to be exactly it, and I will have nailed it. It doesn't make any sense, right? But what I like about this is it immediately grounds the characters. Oh, okay, cool. Thank you, Nuker Wolf. I will check both. It immediately grounds the characters in the carnival and like needing to get their parents back, right? So like when the characters awaken the next day, all their parents are swapped with workers from the carnival. They look different, but they insist they are the same people, and won't you come down for breakfast? Right, again, very Coraline. The party must now run into the forest to chase after their family, to get them back, and in so doing, they cross into the Feywild. Yeah, I think that's essentially the hook, right? Is that like this circus comes in, it does like a swap with everybody, and then it leaves, and they have to kind of like run after it, and you know they get to the portal that goes back into the Feywild, and that could be totally different, and I might end up having to scrap all of that or adjust it. But what I like about this is this means that we can again, here's the irony, right? As cool as this idea is, and I like it, like, it actually doesn't have anything to do with our first adventure, because all of this is dependent on the carnival showing up, right? We could hint at it, we could toy with it, but it doesn't actually give us our adventure that we need. Right? We need something for the party to do first. Well, okay, we could do an adventure where they encounter the Fey crossing, but they can't use it because it's not active. Right, that there's like some kind of it's almost like a not an aftershock, but like a pre-shock or whatever of the gate, right? That like if there's something in the forest, if our argument is that the carnival comes through a gate or a crossing in the forest, we could center an adventure around the location that the crossing is going to happen, and we can end the adventure with the door opening and the carnival coming through, right? That it's like some kind of a little prelude to the carnival's arrival. Yeah, okay. So let's scroll down here. Let me just check and make sure you guys can still see where I'm at. Perfect, okay. So adventure. For some reason, each member of the party is drawn to the Fey Crossing, though inert, which, though inert, is where the Witchlight Carnival will pass through. Carnival will pass through. Yeah. Okay. What if there's a thing? Does a member of the town, possibly Izumi's parents, possibly Cinnamon's mother, need to activate the Fey Crossing to allow the carnival through? I mean, actually what we could do, instead of it being the mother, at least Cinnamon's mother, like, Cinnamon's mother is the only one, like, Cinnamon's mother knows the truth of the village, and says that they are all changelings, not real people, and that they are not to be trusted. Right? That's the reason she doesn't want her child to go in, because she's worried she's going to get snatched. She's especially fearful of the carnival, which she believes, correctly, is the source of the body swapping, source of the role reversal, or whatever we're going to call it, reversal. It's not a body swap, right? It's like they are different people, but they're just like wearing their clothes and acting like them. You know what I mean? It's, again, a very like Coraline thing. Okay, that's cool. It makes you want to go through each. Oh, that's so interesting, because Katz's whole thing is that like they're con men, right? They're like con artists. So it's this extra layer of like duplicity, and you're not who you say you are, you know? Okay, we need to figure out the adventure, but I kind of want to go through each one of these characters and figure out in what way they interact with this. Like, Cinnamon is on the outside of this, like, exchange, right? Cinnamon and her mother don't participate in it, and they're fearful of it, and they avoid it. Cyrus is tricky, because they have this big family with all of these siblings. But I like the idea that Cyrus is old enough to remember a time before this. Cyrus is old enough to remember a time before when their family was someone else. Perhaps over time, the Fae, the imposters, the changelings, begin to look more and more like they're supposed to. Right? Like, let's say, just for example's sake, right, that like Cyrus's grandmother is a goblin, right? A goblin from the Feywild. And so when the carnival comes in and they swap, then the goblin, at least initially for like the first year or two in the mortal realm, looks like a goblin. But as time passes, the longer that goblin plays the role of the grandmother, the more and more they start to look like the grandmother. So that way, by the end of the time, they look like and act like the grandmother, right? But, and then like inverse, the tiefling grandmother who goes into the Feywild starts by looking like a tiefling grandmother, but the longer they spend in the Feywild, the more and more they look like a goblin, right? It's a little weird, but that way you could explain, like, she remembers these other people in her house, right? And the older and older, although I think, yeah, if it's Cyrus, I think it's he, but they remember a time when there were other people in the house. So the only one with memories from that, right? Because they would have been 3 or whatever if it was 8 years ago. Yeah. It's a little weird, but I think we could get away with it. Now, Izumi is interesting because there's all this Shadowfell stuff, right? It doesn't, we kind of cut the Shadowfell reference here, but we could do something with it still, right? That, like, I like the idea of Izumi's parents. Are Izumi's parents the ones trying to break the curse? They are seeking powerful magics which allow them to stop this cycle and live forever as either mortal or fae, right? That, like, they look like kind of dark sorcerers and they're doing these weird rituals. What they're really trying to do is break this repetitive cycle. And so they have all these weird artifacts from the Shadowfell, right, that are kind of like the opposite effect. Ooh, the 11-year-old is trying to find her original. I think they're all trying to find their original parents, right? Like, that's the point. But yeah, I like that. Like, an emphasis on original parents. And I bet she'd appreciate the Spirited Away reference, too. On finding her original parents. But, like, theoretically, everybody except for Cinnamon would have that same thing. Like, Katza would have that, too, right? Like, you know, you could have a character like Katza whose family... Ooh, wait a minute. Okay. Katza's family is posing as members of the town and don't realize that in so doing, they are joining this strange Fae pact. They have no idea and are whisked away, and Katza must rescue them, right? This to me is the Spirited Away plot, right? That, like, everybody else, like, I think the Tieflings know, and I think that Izumi's family know, but it's Katza's family who's pretending to be someone they aren't that gets swept up in this, right? Yeah, okay, that's cool. I like that. Because it like justifies, like, why is it like this? What's the conceit? This is still not our adventure, to be clear, right? Like, this is all still kind of bullshit. But it gives me an angle on each one of them to figure out, like, what, you know, is their motivation? What is their relationship to this? The only question I have then is, like, how does Cinnamon get involved, right? Beyond just, I'm along for the ride. I do think that the player, V, will probably go along for the ride anyway. But I like the idea of Cinnamon's arc being that they have to disobey their parent, right? Like, their arc is about disobeying their parent even when they don't want to, right? Like, if you set up this thing of, like, I always listen to my parents, then you have to present the player with a choice where they have to choose between doing the right thing, which is to go help these people, or doing the safe thing, which is staying in the forest. So we can maybe put that decision on the player and have them play it out. Okay, cool. All of that is good. So I like this idea. I like the notion of it wouldn't be Cinnamon's mother, and it wouldn't be Izumi's parents. Right, but I like the idea that there's somebody in the town who needs to activate the Fae Crossing. So does Izumi's ghost, one of Izumi's ghosts, warn her about this? I think Izumi is because she has the relationship to almost every other character, Izumi is who we have to put the pressure on to motivate the party. That's not exactly F's style as a player. Definitely Katza is much more of the person who would follow a hook. But I still think we should try to... I think Izumi's the key to hooking everybody, and I think that if we can find smaller side motivations for the other characters, so much the better. Yeah, the way I kind of see the structure of the adventure is that it's like... structure. Some time spent in town getting to know everyone and getting to care about all the NPCs, particularly the family. The NPCs, particularly the families, when a small mystery picks up. Following the mystery, the characters. Yeah, what I like about them seeing the Fae crossing and the carnival coming through is this idea of like, it sets up where they need to go. Right? Like they see the portal and they see the carnival come through, like, yay, the carnival's here. We did it. You know, and maybe there's a hint of like, why did they summon the carnival? What was the point? What is this ritual? Right? And so they summon the carnival, and it comes through, and then they summon the carnival. It comes through. They do the whole carnival. Boy, my brain is like spinning. They do the whole carnival arc. They do all the stuff they would normally do, and then when the carnival's done, it packs up and it goes back through the portal, and they follow it. Right? They know now when they discover that their families have been replaced, they know where they have to go because they know where the carnival would be going back to, right? Back through the portal. So seeing it in the kind of like prologue adventure, I think is good because it reinforces this idea that they, it reinforces this idea that they like of where they need to go and what the stakes are. Sorry, I'm sure this is all nonsense. I'm just trying to like puzzle it through at the same time. It is weirdly difficult to come up with an adventure that sets up a campaign that you don't know what it's about, right? The characters discover the Fae crossing. The Fae crossing, and see what it is, and I can watch the carnival come through, Okay. Who is the NPC that does this? I think it's Cyrus's grandmother. I think Cyrus's grandmother is the one who performs the ritual to open the door. I like the idea. I think Cyrus's family are the most devoted to it. Most devoted to this ancient ritual. Oh yeah, because they have Fae blood, right? They're descended from Fae anyway, right? Like, yeah, it's definitely Cyrus's family. Maybe they didn't begin it, but they're kind of like the strongest advocates of the old ways. Yeah. That's cool. Almost like a Midsommar kind of a thing. You know, this like weird old tradition that they just maintain without really thinking about it. Okay. So it's the grandmother that they follow into the forest. I kind of like the idea that like my instinct was that like they see the grandmother doing it, like they watch her do it, but they don't understand why. I kind of think like if the grandmother character is like proud of it and like values this and sees this thing as being important, then I think that she would want Cyrus to do it. I think she invites Cyrus and potentially Cyrus's friends into the forest to see this happen. You know what I mean? Like my initial thought was that like, oh, they steal along and they see something dark happen in the woods, but I think it's the opposite. I think the more we can make it seem like this is a good thing, the more shocking the reveal will be, and the more like the less suspicious they'll be to interact with the carnival, right? If it's like this character of unalloyed good, the grandmother, you know, that's kind of what I think that's right. Instead of doing it in secret, she invites Cyrus. Now that he's home, I think it's he, but I don't know, from school, to help her open the door and invite the carnival in. Yeah, I think that's cool. But I like the idea that Izumi's ghosts still warn her about it. Like Izumi has a suspicion about all of this. Her parents are seeking a way to prevent themselves. That's too high. Prevent themselves from being pulled back into the Feywild. I mean, I still don't hate the idea that they are Shatterkai, right? Where's Izumi? Her parents are Shatterkai, who do not belong in the Feywild, but were imprisoned in a contract, right? Imprisoned in a deal or a contract, from which they cannot escape. Yeah, I like that. It's something like, right, that they have this association with the Shadowfell and these ghosts. Explains why they have all these like occult items and all that stuff. So yeah, I think it's like the first adventure is a number of small kind of mini plots, right? Like each character has a little bit of business to take care of. That eventually leads them into joining Cyrus in the forest. You know? So we gotta figure out what that is. I mean, like, I don't mind them having a combat, but I kind of think if they're kids, right? The party is pretty low combat anyway, but I kind of think that if they're kids, maybe what I'll do is I'll say, like, if you're a rogue, you know, then you get expertise. You're like a level 0 rogue, essentially. You know, you have like half the hit points you would normally have. You just have the like one class feature from your class, right? So like, I don't think it's sneak attack. I think it's expertise, right? You're especially good at 2 skills. Maybe you don't even have your class skills yet. You just have your background skills. That's kind of cool. Yeah. So let's do like 0 level characters. Although I think there's an Arcadia that's about this. I should maybe check that out. But like, here's my temporary idea: level 0 characters. Because there could be something fun too about like once they go through the portal of them leveling up to 2. Like they jump way up in level, right? No class skills. Instead, just background, and ancestral skills. Then 1 class feature to start with. No weapons. So like, what are our class features here? Expertise. Yeah, let me get the player's handbook, because I think expertise for the rogue is cool. My instinct is favored terrain for the ranger rather than favored enemy. But I think that depends on which ranger you pick. Let's see. And no clerics. Monks are tricky. It could be unarmored defense. Yeah, but no one's going to be wearing armor, right? I think it could be martial arts. I don't think that's so bad, right? That like, it's the expertise, Katsa. Let's look at the ranger. Oh, natural explorer. That's what it is. Yeah, natural explorer. Although I hate natural explorer. I think natural explorer is a shitty fucking ability. But that's okay. Natural. I can get away with it. Like in the Feywild, things work differently, right? For Cinnamon. Cyrus, I think, can have martial arts. For Cyrus. And lastly, the Warlock. I feel like it's like 1 invocation or something, you know? It's some kind of cool power, but not quite spellcasting. Pact magic. We don't get an invocation until 2nd level, so pact magic. And otherworldly patron. Oh, sure, yeah, they get the, like, otherworldly patron ability. Which I think for Izumi is going to be the dead or the undead. Because it's ghosts. Oh my gosh. This one shift key is not working so well anymore. No weapons, no gear. No gear, no combat. At least not for this first bit, right? Okay, cool. So what we need then in the last little, we have like about an hour left of the stream, is like what exactly is the nature of the ritual? Are there things they have to collect? Are there dangers to do that, right? Like I like the idea of they each get a little, ooh, what if it's like the ritual requires children or something like that? That sounds very sinister, but you know what I mean? Like it requires a certain number of young people to do it or whatever. I like the idea of Cyrus's grandmother giving Cyrus the power to like nominate the 4 people that will go with, or the 3 people that will go with, you know, that like they have to go choose some of their friends. So like Izumi seems like a good bet, but there's like reasons. Like I like the player being able to pick who else goes and does it with them, right? And that like the kind of implied choices are, you know, so I'm imagining like flower crowns or something, right? It's like, okay, there's a certain number of them. In order to perform the ritual, you have to give these out. Who do you want to give them to? You know, and then over the course of that first session, it's like giving them out. Cinnamon presents an interesting challenge because if Cinnamon is kind of like separated from the party, then it implies that they might not be on the, like, they might not be chosen for it, you know what I mean? Like, which I think is actually kind of interesting if Cinnamon just watches it or observes it, right? So what I need then is I need each one of these characters to have a little side quest that they can be up to for like the first half of the session until it's time to leave to go do the thing. Like until Cyrus gives them the flower crown, and then they can go out into the forest to do the ritual, right? So what you could do is you could say that like grandmother gives Cyrus like kind of like that wedding tradition, right? Like something borrowed, something blue, like all that shit. If it's like, if there are 4 children that need to be involved in the ritual to open the gate, then like there are little kind of like folkloric or kind of like riddle-esque descriptions of the 4 kids, right? Like someone frightened, someone tall, someone something, right? Like, so that way Cyrus can kind of do some detective work and try to track down the characters, and you can tie the other little subplots to those themes, right? So just as an example, I wouldn't use this one, but like if one of the requirements for one of the people in the ritual is, you know, someone covered in flour, then one of the characters is like helping their parents bake something. You know what I mean? Where it's like you can design the subplot around the requirement of the ritual, so that way Cyrus can look at the other characters like, oh, you have flour on you, you should come do this thing. It's a little bit delicate in terms of making sure that the things all kind of line up, but I think I trust Cyrus's player to put the pieces together for that. Excuse me. So then, what are these subplots? Let's figure those out. Subplots for everybody, and what does the ritual require? Because we can tailor I would rather focus on the subplot, design the subplots first around the character, and then tailor the ritual requirements to the subplots. So what is Katz's little subplot? What is Cinnamon's subplot? And what is Izumi's subplot? I mean, Cyrus's is to find the people. It might be kind of interesting too to like have there be a more obvious option than Cinnamon, right? Like if Cyrus has a big family, like I like the idea that it's not inconceivable that Cyrus would pick one of their siblings to do it. But you don't want to make it a thing where Cyrus could just pick a bunch of their siblings. You have to make the prerequisites for the ritual. Maybe one of them could fulfill it, right? Like whatever the Cinnamon one is. If Cinnamon chooses to refuse the call, but I like the idea that there's like there's an option of choosing one of the other, like choosing an NPC for that third slot. Okay. So anyway, let's focus on these subplots. So Katza, they are a charlatan, and they are posing as a noble. Let's maybe design their family a little bit more. right, to figure this out. I think they're an only child. We've established. Who is their family? Let's see. I'm gonna roll for some genders. Okay. They're a half elf. So presumably one of them is an elf and one of them is not. Okay. So let me see. Yeah, a man and a woman. Who's the elf? The man. Okay. So father, elf, mother, human. You could also do where they were like the child, she's a child of like two half elves is also interesting. Okay. Father, mother. Oh yeah. So quick note about Izumi real quick is that like you could do a thing where Izumi is a half elf, right? But both of like Izumi is a half elf, but both of the imposters, right? But the imposters, but her parents are both Shadowkai. Are both Shadowkai, while the imposters are actually both a human and an elf, right? Like the implication being that the imposters, the ones who come in and claim to be her parents, are actually her parents, because that's the way it would work, right? Like if 10 years ago or whatever, you know, she was born, then she was born, and she was born in the town, then she was born to whoever were sort of playing her parents at that time, who would be the human and the elf who just spent all of this time in the Feywild, right? So the Shadowkai are who she thinks of as her parents, whereas the human and the elf are who are actually her parents, even though they didn't raise her, or at least biologically her parents, right? Yeah, because I was thinking about that. If I want to do them in Shadowkai, how do you do that? And that's exactly how you do it. Which I think adds this like interesting level of like tragedy to it, where the people that you think of as imposters are actually your birth parents. Whereas in Katz's case, that's the opposite. Like Katz does not know these people at all, has no relationship to them. It's these fake creatures that have been pulled out of the ether or whatever to kind of, since they're new people in the village. Okay, so the father and mother, like it's tricky because they're nobles, or they're pretending to be nobles, and you presumably want the subplot to have something to do with that, but you don't necessarily want it to be that's their whole thing. Like they have to have other kind of traits or other things about them, you know what I mean? Here's what I'm gonna do. This is a little weird. I've not done this before. I'm gonna open up the background for Charlatan, and I'm gonna roll on the table and see if I can get like a personality trait for each of the parents to give a sense of who they are. Because yeah, I like the idea that Katza has like a little mission, right? That if Katza is kind of their like confidant, that Katza has like little tasks and little training things that they get sent on to do to kind of train them to be a better charlatan. Again, kind of Lies of Locke Lamora-esque. Okay, so let's do personality traits, just as a sense. So for the father, I pocket anything I see that might be of some value. Ooh, that's kind of interesting. I mean, already I have an idea. I pocket anything I might see that would have some value, right? And then the mother, I got 5, which is I lie about almost everything, even when there's no good reason to. It's a little trickier to do. Almost everything, even when there's no good reason to. She's like, so she's the better liar, he's the better thief. So my thinking is that Katz's father tells her, oh dude, it's so good, it's one of my favorite series, absolutely. It's kind of in a George R. Martin, Patrick Rothfuss state right now though, where 3 books are out and they're supposed to be 7, and it's been years since the 4th book was supposed to come out. So, but no, they're great. So I think that the subplot is that Katza is sent on a mission is sent on a mission to steal something, some item of notoriety from Izumi's family. Right? So it's like they need a signet ring, or they need, I mean, it wouldn't be that, but you know what I mean? Like, they need something that, like, either it's like a task, you know? Either it's simply a task to perform, or it's something the family needs to maintain its identity. You know, so that he's got to, like, sneak in, he's got to pickpocket, he's got to do all of that stuff. I'm curious. I want to see. I know that I made their character already. The player made their character. That's, yeah. Normally that system works for me. I don't have a lot of players whose names start with I, you know, so that makes that confusing. The player made their character already, so I want to see if they picked sleight of hand as one of their skills. Because I don't think you get it as a charlatan. But that might be kind of interesting if they don't have it, right? If it seems like they should and they don't. Ooh, what are the items needed for the ritual? Could be, that's cool. Yeah, I think it's like a weird coincidence thing, right? Apologize if there's lag right now. I'm opening up Roll20 in another window, and it tends to get a little persnickety at me when I try to both stream and have Roll20 open. Do they have sleight of hand? They do. Okay, cool. Beautiful. Okay. So, an item... Yeah, that's good, Nuker Wolf. Needed for the ritual. Because my thought was that, like, ritual was just, like, a thief, right? Something like that, right? That the prerequisite is someone who has stolen something. You know, if it's all about changelings, I like them to be kind of thematic like that. Someone who has stolen something today. You know? Okay, so Cinnamon subplot. Cinnamon subplot needs to be about the mother and about, like, the kind of fear of the town and the fear of the coming day. I don't feel like we need to roll for her, but I might, just in case. Just to give me something. I like the idea that she's wary, right? She's protective. She's got that kind of that classic, like, well, like, yeah, what is her... She knows about the ritual, but why does she live so close to the town? What is her connection to the town? You know, what is the deal here? Let's pull up a personality trait for Hermit, which is their background. I am utterly serene even in the face of danger. Let me try Bond. I'm still seeking the enlightenment I pursued in my seclusion, and it still eludes me. Hermit's kind of weird. I might try Outlander, because sometimes those are a little better. Yeah, I've never used these for NPCs before, but I just happen to have the book here, so let's try it. Personality trait for Outlander is, I'm driven by a wanderlust that has led me away from home. Doesn't quite work because, again, they're staying in one place. Yeah, okay. So her mother fears the town, but still lives in the shadow of it. Like, why wouldn't they move off? Is there something in the town? Ooh, yeah, okay. So what if the point here is that the Cinnamon's father, a serpent folk, was in the town when the exchange happened 8 years ago. 8 years ago. Cinnamon was still an egg at the time. And now he's trapped in the Feywild. Though he is expected to return this time. Yet, because he wasn't a member of the town, he has no obligation to return, and thus did not. So the idea, like, the mission is that, the little subplot is that Cinnamon's mother sends her to spy on the carnival as it arrives. Looking for a particular figure or a particular something, right? Like looking for her father, but he doesn't come back through, which means he's still in the Feywild somewhere, right? That, I think, is maybe like a good adventure for later, but that means then that she is eager for the carnival to return, right? She is eager for the carnival to return, but she, yeah. Okay. So, but that doesn't give us a plot for right now. You know what I mean? That gives us a plot for later. But I like that. I like the conceit of, like, because that's one thing I would be worried about, is if it's like she... Yeah, that gives Cinnamon a reason to go through the portal. Sorry, I'm just thinking. It gives Cinnamon a reason to go through the portal. And it gives... But it also makes sense that she would say... That, like, her mother would say no, right? We would not want her to go through. Yeah, okay, that works. I don't know what her plot is this time, but, like, something about going and spying on it, right? I mean, I think this still essentially works. You would maybe want to pad it out a little bit. You know what I mean? I like the idea of, like, someone with leaves in her hair. A climber. Someone with leaves in their hair. Even in her hair, right? That it has to be. And they're just spying on the carnival as it arrives, looking for a particular figure. Or maybe the opposite happens, you know. Alternatively, maybe Cinnamon's mother tells her to stay at home while she goes and spies on the carnival, forcing V to decide whether to obey. So what I like about someone with leaves in their hair is that, like, it makes sense for that to be Cinnamon, right? But it wouldn't be that hard for somebody else to do that. So if Cyrus does want to, like, put one of their siblings up to it, they can just rub leaves in their hair and then that's fine. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's cool. I like that. So then Cyrus is about finding the 4 people for the ritual. Tasked by their grandmother, Cyrus must find the 4 participants, all children, each apart. I want to make it rhyme, right? I don't know how I would do that. I have to reword them, presumably. Needed to open the Fey Crossing. Let's find the 4 participants, all children, each a part of a rhyme, needed to open the Fey Crossing in order to complete the ritual. They will hopefully settle on the 3 other players, but could potentially choose some NPCs as well. And then lastly, Izumi, I think, is warned by one of the ghosts that haunts her, that the grandmother is not to be trusted, and will begin all of this again. The ghosts want her to watch the grandmother Alternatively, her parents might forbid it or seek to leave the town if they can. Is there some kind of a thing? That's the question. If her parents, if the Shatterkai can't leave the town, then like, yeah, there has to be something that prevents them from just like walking away, right? Like, there's something that binds them to the town that prevents them from leaving because they were caught up in the Fae bargain. Yeah, okay. I think that that's right. Yeah, there are probably some other ritual ingredients involved, but I like that. So, for this one, I think it's like, someone, you know, who slept poorly last night or whatever. Someone who had a nightmare. Someone who had a nightmare last night. You know, something that, like, again, the only character that I can kind of control in terms of who it is. And then you need one for Cyrus. You know, someone who reads a book, or, you know, a reader. Someone with their nose in a book. Like, it wouldn't be that, but it would be something like that, right? Or like someone who can stand on their head, maybe, because they're a monk, right? An acrobat. Someone who can stand on their head. You know, something along those lines. Yeah, you have to figure it out, but yeah, get your head in bed if you're doing like who slept restless in their bed, someone who can stand on their head. Okay, I mean, I think that's pretty good, you know, assuming that first session is a little bit slow and it's kind of about like meeting the characters and running around. I would want some stakes. So maybe there's some kind of a monster or a danger that pops up at some point, when they go through the, like, going through the forest to get to the Fae Crossing is maybe a little bit dangerous because there are beasts or whatever, you know? So you can maybe do something like that where they have to like work together to scare off like an owl bear or some other kind of a monster that isn't necessarily gonna, you know, present a combat. But yeah, I feel like that's essentially your first adventure, and then the carnival comes into town. And regardless of what happens with the carnival, you can kind of do whatever it is you need to do with it, right? Yeah. Regardless of like what happens in the book, I can shift it to what I need it to be, and then I can take what I like or don't like from the actual text. Okay, yeah, I think that's pretty good. I still need to think of a title, because I always like to change the name of the adventure I'm running in case people start to look it up. I had that happen in a session last week where I had a player like look up an NPC name and then like basically spoil themselves on a big thing in Storm King's Thunder. And I was like, I had to kind of be like, guys, no, absolutely not. I was maybe a little harsh with them, but now they know in future not to go looking things up. But I need to think of a new name, because if you call it The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, inevitably someone's going to Google that or Google the Witchlight Carnival, and they're going to figure stuff out. So like, I would like to come up with a new name to at least obscure it a little bit, but I think I'm calling my Storm King's Thunder campaign The North Trembles, which I like. North Trembles with an exclamation point. So I'll have to figure out something for the Witchlight. I like the idea of it feeling like the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, right? Like, or you know, something along those lines. It has that kind of like old storybook sort of a tale. But yeah, I feel like that's probably it for today. Only about an hour and a half, but that is all right. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming out and watching this this Adventure Up stream. I apologize if it was a little bit scatterbrained. I feel like I was just kind of trying to put all the pieces together, but I think we ended up in a really cool place. Like, I keep thinking about what you said, Nuker Wolf, about Spirited Away, and that feels very much like the right tone I want to strike here. I'm curious to see how much the Carnival and the Feywild will like conform to that, but I think that's a great way to think about Fey in a kind of non-European context. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for watching, everybody. Like I said, we do a lot of streaming here on the channel and other videos as well. I'm trying to be a little bit more prolific with my streams. So right now, you should be able to watch 3 streams a week on YouTube. That's Tuesdays for adventure prep, Thursdays I'm doing a monster workshop, and then Sundays I do a world building stream for my upcoming Dwarven campaign. Something witchy this way comes. I was thinking something like that. Yeah, David, like to play with that idea. Yeah, that I have not ruled that out at all. Yeah, so come check us out here on the channel. If you're not subscribed already, please hit that subscribe button. You'll get notified when we go live and when we have other videos that we post. You can also find me on Twitter. I am at XP Web Series. The letters X, the letters P, and then Web Series is one word. I tweet a lot, mostly about lore and world building and like running the game, stuff like that. We've got a Discord, we've got a Patreon, a lot of other ways you can support. But if you really want to hang out with me sometime, you can hire me to run games. This game that I prepped here today is a client game. This is for some people that hired me to run a game, and I would love to run a game for you. So if you want to check out my website, it is pro-dm.net, and you can look up everything you need to know about hiring me to run a game for you. I would love to hear from you. But yeah, I will be back in 2 days on Thursday. Probably around the same time, we'll be doing a monster workshop stream. We'll be working on the Basilisk to redesign it for our Patreon. So yeah, hope to see you then. Thank you so much for coming out, both David and Nuker Wolf. It was awesome to have somebody here to talk to, even though it was a lot of me just talking to myself. But I will talk to you all later. And until then, happy adventuring.